Hello, everyone, and welcome to Commodity Insights Live. Today, we're discussing one of the most widely held assumptions in food economics, the idea that as people become more affluent, they will eat less rice. Namely, we will discuss recent work we did in examining the relationship between income and rice consumption. My name is Greg, and I am a principal analyst for global rice markets at S&P Global Commodity Insights. With me is my co-author, Dipanji, a principal analyst covering rice and cotton in the APAC region. Good to have you here, Dipanji.
Thanks, Greg. It's great to join. And yes, the idea that rising income means lower rice consumption is repeated often. So let's begin with the question. Does rising income always means falling rice consumption?
So perhaps surprisingly, it doesn't. In Southeast Asia, we have been seeing a decline of roughly about 1% a year in total consumption over the past decade. But when we step back and look at the global picture, it's not really that simple. In other countries, like the Philippines and many African nations, we're actually witnessing the opposite trend. That is, as incomes grow, rice consumption increases as well. Specifically, rice consumption is rising by about 1% per year, and in Africa, it is rising by about 3%. This highlights the importance of examining individual countries and regions, as the factors influencing rice consumption trends in one place are likely to differ from those in another. So let's turn to that point next. What are some of the reasons for the rice consumption trends we're seeing across the globe?
Let me begin with East Asia, where the idea of declining rice consumption was studied first. Large-scale economic expansion, rising incomes, and widespread urbanization over the past several decades have enabled people to discover and afford foods that are not staple, such as meat, vegetables, and processed foods. However, in places like the Philippines and most of the African nations, as you mentioned, rice consumption is increasing. Population growth combined with a modest economic expansion is likely to encourage the need for more imports and government support programs that focus on staples such as rice.
Very good. And I'll point out that the US is another interesting case, as despite its high standard of living, rice consumption is actually growing pretty modestly, by a little under 1% per year. In the US, we are seeing this increased demand for specialty varieties, such as basmati, jasmine, and fragrant rice, as well as rice grown using climate-friendly practices. On the other hand, we also found that other countries, such as Brazil, China, and India, have a weak relationship between income and rice consumption.
So, to summarize what we have been discussing, we discovered that rising incomes and declining rice consumptions are not a generalized phenomena. Instead, it's more of a product of a country's specific economic, demographic, and cultural situation. And I think it's important to note that the distinct reasons for increasing consumption in places like Africa and the US will have significant implications on rice producers.
I think that is an excellent point. Southeast Asia's decline will likely be partially offset by Africa's growth, resulting in fairly stable global rice demand. However, declining consumption in Southeast Asia means producers there will need to increasingly rely on exports to places with unmet demand, like Africa. This will require competitive pricing, trade agreements, and adequate infrastructure. A second avenue, though, would be to focus on developing these premium and sustainable rice varieties for more developed markets, like the US. In fact, we're already seeing Vietnam attempt to be this early driver in this space, making significant investments in low carbon rice production.
Indeed, it will be interesting to see how producers respond in the coming years to the varied demands of rice consumers worldwide. But on that note, that wraps up our Commodity Insights live session for today. Thank you, Greg, for such an insightful discussion. We will watch these trends and let's catch up soon to see how they play out. For our listeners who found today's discussion helpful, please note that we have more in-depth weekly analysis and reports. Please feel free to contact us for a more detailed discussion. Looking forward to see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.